Welcome to Rossman Radio, the podcast where we dive deep into the journeys of entrepreneurs, founders, and e-commerce brands that are breaking through the noise and scaling like never before. I'm Elise, and Rossman Media is a trend-forward social media agency specializing in going viral and delivering 10x returns for the brands that we work with. Each week, I'll sit down with industry disruptors to talk about the highs, the lows, and the exact strategies that help them grow from their first sale to multi-million-dollar milestones. If you're ready to unlock what it really takes to win on social, build a community, and multiply your revenue, then you're in the right place. Let's get into it.
Welcome back to Rossman Radio, where we sit down with founders, business leaders, and marketing professionals to talk about what's really driving their growth today. I'm Rob, Director of Strategy at Rossman, and today I'm joined by Amy Divaraniya, the founder of Oova. Amy has an incredible story. She turned her own fertility journey into a company that's now helping women and clinicians track hormones with clinical grade precision. Oova has grown from a direct-to-consumer product into a partner for hundreds of clinics across the country. And Amy is also leading the way in new research around perimenopause and women's health. Amy, I'm excited to dive in with you today. Thanks for joining.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Of course. So you shared that Oova started as a personal mission and grew into a product that's now used by clinicians, clinics. What's the most rewarding part of seeing that journey unfold?
I think the most rewarding part is actually getting the hey, I'd like to cancel my subscription email, because we've actually helped somebody achieve their goal. It could be trying to get pregnant. It could be getting all of the hormonal data they need for baseline or monitoring their treatment, whatever it may be. We serve some purpose, and we actually met them where they needed to be, got them the answers they were craving, and they have a solution.
That's so great. And talk a little bit about how this product came to be, because I think you have a really unique story, especially about how it kind of took off in an unexpected way.
Yeah, I honestly never thought I'd start my own business. It wasn't something that was like trying to come up with this crazy idea to launch and completely derail my life. But what ended up happening is I was trying to get pregnant at the end of my PhD, and my husband and I decided we wanted to pursue parenthood naturally and not pursue it and going down the invasive route. I've always struggled with irregular cycles. And we expected the journey to not be easy. Like, I didn't really expect to get pregnant my first try, but nothing really could have prepared us for the dark and devastating journey we actually did embark on. It was very lonely, because what ended up happening is each month I would basically get a negative pregnancy test, and I would go into it thinking, okay, this is the month we did it. Like, everything felt right. You really build yourself up, you build your partner up. And then to get that negative test, like, yes, I'm devastated, but what was even worse was seeing my husband be devastated and having to, like, it was just a really weird dynamic. I just kept feeling like I was failing. And being type A, that's not in my DNA. So I realized very quickly that the data that was missing from my data set, as I was collecting like every metric, right? Like, I'm watching every single thing that I'm doing, tracking it all. But I still did not really understand what my hormones were doing. And they dictate everything in our menstrual cycle. And so I was like, how do I actually capture this? Because that smiley face thing, like, man, that was not working for me. It never blinked. I only saw a smiley face 5 times in the 18 months it took us to get pregnant. And it was oftentimes just the blank circle. And I'll talk about like no answers. That empty circle really makes you feel fantastic day after day. So I wanted to provide women with this objective hormonal data so they can actually take their journey into their own hands and maybe achieve their goal, yes, or at least be able to walk into their doctor's office and have a two-way conversation. So here's what my hormones are saying. I think this is what's going on. What do you think? Or if a doctor makes a recommendation, it's no longer like you're walking in devastated and lost and you're looking for some clarity. You're able to have a two-way conversation where now you can be like, okay, I hear you, but why? How does that relate to my hormone patterns? And how is this going to change things? And it's not limited to fertility. It's really scales across every phase of women's lives, because every phase is dictated by a specific type of hormone pattern. And if you understand that, you're really in a place of power. And I think that's an incredibly valuable position for women to be in.
That's an amazing mission, and I think that so many women can identify with where you are. I know that even, tangentially knowing friends who've gone through that fertility journey, it's both where people, it can be both sides thinking it's like, is it my fault? Is it something I'm doing wrong? Is it me? But then having the context behind what you've seen with your, with the data is important. So tell me how you got started. Tell me about the period when you started the company, and on the marketing side, how you really got the word out to begin with.
Yeah, sure. So I guess let me quickly describe the product so everyone understands what we're talking about here. But basically, we have an at-home hormone testing platform, and we currently measure three hormones: luteinizing hormone, progesterone, and estrogen through urine over the course of time. So you can get 15 to 30 days of measuring within whichever kit you get. Each kit comes with 30 or 60 of these test strips. I'll describe it for those that are listening, but it's basically similar to a pregnancy test. There's a urine stick part of it, and then there's a QR code in a window that shows you 1, 2, or 3 lines. Basically, you pee in a cup, dip the appropriate hormone test in there, and then scan it with your phone. When you get your results within seconds in our app. And then if you're working with a clinical team, we are fully HIPAA compliant, so you can share your data with your doctor if you like to. So now, when we started the company, the goal was always to make sure that we're not just inundating a patient with data, but if they were to take that data to their clinician, the doctor wouldn't just like flip through it and push it to the side, be like, all right, great, I'm going to still do my own protocol. They would actually look at it as data and be like, okay, great, this is what we do next based on this information. So I knew we had to be clinically validated. We had to have that clinical trust. So it took us 3 years to develop the tech. I spoke with any clinician that could give me the time of day in those 3 years to understand what data would you want to see, what would I have to do to make you trust it, how would you want to visualize this data. And so now, fast forward 3 years, we have the tech ready. We were about to kick off a clinical trial. Well, that trial was supposed to start at the end of March 2020, right when New York City shut down for COVID. And so now here I am sitting on a bunch of inventory. Fertility care is viewed as an elective procedure. And so you have all these families that were all of a sudden being told, sorry, your treatment is postponed indefinitely. You have devastated patients and you have devastated clinicians as well. Well, what ended up happening is some of the clinicians that I talked to over those 3 years actually started knocking on our door asking if we had any prototypes because they wanted to continue monitoring their patients, even though they couldn't see them in office. And so I was like, oh man, okay, I do have kits that aren't being used in the study. I know how you want to see the data. Everything is HIPAA compliant because we built it that way. And all I needed to do was create a clinician dashboard. So we shipped out a bunch of kits to one of these clinicians to give to our patient. And if you remember early COVID, Instagram Live was like the thing that everybody was doing. And so all of a sudden, I get tagged on a Tuesday evening that you've been mentioned in Instagram Live. And I was like, okay, whatever. I look at it, and it was that clinician talking about our technology and how she was able to monitor her patients remotely and still continue care. And all of a sudden, my inbox is flooded with clinicians asking, what is this? How do I get my hands on it? Do you have any more? And instead of me launching direct to consumer as I thought we would, we ended up launching B2B. And then direct to consumer came 9 months later.
That's amazing. And yeah, I mean, it's so wild how that works out, where you had a business plan, COVID flipped things on its head, and you started in reverse. So
Yeah.
making that pivot from direct to consumer to more of a B2B, B2 clinic focus is a big shift. What did you learn in that process that surprised you the most? What was the most difficult or the most surprising part of making the shift?
I mean, I guess like hindsight, it's not that surprising, but in the moment, it really was, is how much need can drive demand. Because to give you perspective, the clinician that initially used Oova, what she was having patients do was she would be on a Zoom call, have them spit in a tube, dip a swab in, and then hold the test to the Zoom camera. And I was like, are you kidding me? And then the doctor's trying to interpret the test through Zoom. And I was like, that's insane. So the fact that we were able to build a better solution so quickly and offer it in that moment, I think we were really, sorry, I think that was really loud. I can say that again so that it's not in the video. Let me turn this off.
Oh, no,
So
you're
sorry
good.
about that.
We've got noise canceling on, so I didn't hear
Oh, Oh,
You
I'm
can.
so sorry.
Oh no, you're good. You can start again.
Okay.
But
So
go
one of
back if like to a point, a point that's comfortable for you.
Yeah, sure. So I guess one of the big things that we realized is that if you're able to provide clinicians or your customer with a solution that truly meets their need, it's going to drive demand much faster than you expect it to. And I don't think anything really set me up for that because in my mind, I thought we had to check off these boxes before this customer would even bite. And it turns out we didn't because need really outweighed the requirements, I guess.
That's really interesting. You mentioned so this big push came that was inspired by essentially a de facto influencer clinician on
Mhm.
Instagram that's kind of giving you the big boost during COVID during Instagram lives. I know that we've also talked about how what once was a really powerful tool for getting the word out there has become a little bit more restrictive over time. How have Meta's ad policies made it hard for women's health brands or services to grow, in your opinion? And how have you adapted to your own marketing strategy as a result?
This is like a really something I'm really passionate about because I feel like any women's health company is basically up against a brick wall to be successful when it comes to paid acquisition. Um, First of all, the consumer that we are targeting is, and I hate using that word targeting, but like let's talk marketing speak. That's what we're doing. Are women. They are the primary spenders when it comes to healthcare. And so now you're targeting a really expensive person to start with, right? Now you layer in a solution to support her. It becomes even more complicated because now all of a sudden the word vagina or the word sex or the word um, like even perimenopause, ovulation, all these words that are actually like physiological and biological are banned. Pregnancy is banned. I'm sorry, these are like common things that 50% of the population is going to go through, and yet we can't talk about it. But you can have an ad with a banana talking about erectile dysfunction, and that gets passed. So, do I have to come up with a fruit to like put onto an ad in order for this to pass? I'll use a peach, I'll use whatever, that still gets rejected. So, no, that's not the solution. So, already you're up against this wall to get success. Then what happened earlier this year is it got even more complicated because what Meta decided to do was say if you are a women's health company that's servicing fertility, you are going to have, you can no longer consider a conversion a purchasing event. And that became really difficult for us because now what do you do as a consumer company? You are going to want to optimize your conversion to someone that's purchasing. So instead, what we had to do is we could no longer use that. We had to use a proxy event. And so initially, we used add to cart. I mean, how many websites do you have stuff in a cart that you never intend to buy? Right. So I'm optimizing for the wrong person right out of the gate. And that really took a hit. So I was like, in my mind, what you're doing is you're basically targeting women's health companies to invest more money into your platform to get subpar results because we're reliant on it. And so what we've had to do now is, and like you could go down this whole rabbit hole about how the money that we have is so difficult to fundraise to begin with, female founder, women's health, like we know the stats of how little funding we all get. And now you're going to take that limited funding that I've worked so hard to get and make it even more expensive for me to like get a customer and even raise awareness. So what we've been doing is we've kind of divested in a lot of our investment in paid acquisition because it's just I can't justify it. And what we're doing now is we focus on our differentiators. The one thing that we do that no one else really does is in this space is prioritize research and presenting at various conferences and letting the data speak for itself. We believe in our data so much, and we know that we're moving the needle in what is considered standard of care. So we've been publicizing a lot more of our research, not necessarily through paid, through organic channels. We consider our clinicians our influencers because they're using the platform. They have case studies, they have patients that you can share success stories with. And all of a sudden, it's forced us to become a bit more creative than the traditional channels. because I don't see long-term success with the existing solutions.
Yeah, and it is a real shame. I wanted to talk about this on the podcast because I think that it's something that we see a lot of our clients, a lot of Rossmann clients struggling with the level of support from Meta as they shift, they outsource their support, but also as the automated systems incorrectly flag things that are not against policy. And navigating those, almost like having to have a separate, you have to have a full-time job just to navigate those rules. What you were referring to is that obviously Meta doesn't want to target, to use the marketing language, based on personal data. Personal data is really sensitive and important. There's HIPAA, there's all sorts of things that require Meta to be careful around those things. But what's changed is that there's tightened regulations around specifically women's health and fertility, where bottom of funnel conversions, like for Oova, which would be a purchase, are no longer allowed. So
Correct.
brands like Oova are allowed to educate people about their products, send them to the landing page, fill out a form, but not make a purchase. And when your Meta ads are told that they can't make it, or they're optimizing for an event other than a purchase, your ads aren't going to be as efficient as a business. So it's a real challenge that a lot of people find themselves in, and it's a shame because a lot of brands like Oova are trying to do good work for people that need it. Like we talked about with the demand that you realized firsthand during COVID that was there for this kind of product. And it's a really challenging area to navigate. And like you said, moving away from a traditional ad campaign into pretty much an influencer, creator-driven, clinician-driven strategy is a good move, but ultimately less efficient than a normal ad campaign.
100%. But then, I think something else, I don't want to just harp on things that affect just women's health, but across the board, and I'm sure, Rob, I'd love your perspective here, but when we have days that are really good on Meta or Google, and I ask our agency, why is this day so good? How do we replicate this? No one has an answer because it's just a black box. You literally do not know what caused. Is it just the day of the week? That's what we've attributed it to. It's the day of the week that we're stronger. Is it really that simple?
Well, this brings me to another point too, where the goal with, and a lot of this has to do with privacy. So new privacy rules have limited the data that advertisers like us have to target, to find our ideal customers. So instead, Meta, Google, all the major ad platforms are using machine learning to try to cluster anonymously people's data into groups so that they can use their algorithms to find us the right customers. We used to do things like upload lists with anonymized data, and then they would go find those similar customers. We no longer can or need to do that because the algorithm is sent to do it. But unfortunately, this also means putting a lot of trust in the existing system. And if that existing system doesn't work for you, there's no way to go in and find out what part isn't working. So exactly. It's a lot of trust and faith you're putting in a system that is already restricting you, as a brand within the space that you're in. So with that said, you mentioned adapting to more of a clinician focused, educational focused on your social media channels. You also mentioned research. So you mentioned expanding into more research and using that as sort of an anchor to get people aware of the brand, to find out more about what you're offering. How is your SEO efforts on your site going? Do you publish this research on your site? Tell me a little bit about your strategy for using your own proprietary research to sort of drive awareness of Oova.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question because while we started with fertility, we expanded into perimenopause last year, and that's been a game changer for us. Now, keep in mind, for fertility, the hormone patterns and the things that you're looking for are pretty predictable, and there's a lot of data and research out there on the fertility journey, right? However, when you look at perimenopause, there's barely anything. I think the last time I looked, there was 2,400 articles in PubMed for perimenopause, but over 30,000 for erectile dysfunction, right? So there's very little data for me to model anything off of for perimenopause. So when we launched our initial product, the ask was, to women, hey, like, we can't answer all your questions, but help us be part of the solution and give us data so that we can create these right models. That was like one of the best callings we've ever done because women were like jumping to give us to help us like build this model out. And so now what's happened is with all of the data that we have at this point, we have over 30,000 cycles of data at this point. It's pretty amazing. And it's a pretty robust data set. Um, we're no matter what we find, it's groundbreaking. So we have been actively publishing our research and our data at all the leading women's health conferences. So the Menopause Society, American Society of Reproductive Medicine, the American College of OBGYN, like really across the board, so that we can not only train patients in our platform, but we can also train the clinical team, and then eventually work on changing regulations and the guidelines of how you treat women. Right, that takes a lot more time. We do publish this on our website, so we do like the actual poster and the actual research are definitely available. What we're currently working on are creating SEO optimized landing pages so women can actually find it in search.
Yeah, that's a great point. I wanted to touch on that because the other question that as an agency we get a ton is about AI search. It's like
Yeah.
as search behavior changes from looking from Google as the primary, pretty much the sole funnel, to people looking for answers on ChatGPT, on Perplexity, on the even AI search on Google. Having data on your site is specific data is all the more important. So people are looking for specific answers, and what Google would typically do is provide people with the most relevant sites that had those answers. But AI search is kind of cutting out the middleman. So if your site does have specific answers, it's more likely to show up in those searches and listed as sources, and then you're more likely to get that traffic to come through for you. But I think that especially in your industry, it makes a lot of sense to have that data.
Yeah, I mean, women are smart. They don't want to be sold to. They want to be told, like, this is how this can help me. But it's not about selling to them. It's about educating them. And so we really follow that line of thinking.
Completely. So where do you see things going in the future for you? I know it seems like after this initial boom, things have been going pretty steadily well. What's the next step for Oova?
Well, like I said earlier, like we're not stopping at the fertility and perimenopause journeys. We're really scaling across all areas of women's health. What has really started shining through for us is that the woman who has the perfect 28-day cycle is not the one that's using Oova. Most of our users have some underlying health condition or hormonal imbalance that either hasn't been diagnosed yet, has been misdiagnosed, or is really causing a lot of side effects or issues for the patient today. And so what we're starting to do is tease that out a bit more. Can we provide you with truly actionable insights based on your hormone patterns, regardless of what your reproductive condition or imbalance is? And not diagnose you, but at least give you the right path to a proper diagnosis. It could be as simple as giving you specific questions to ask your doctor. It could be trying lifestyle modifications. It could be monitoring symptoms and seeing if my hormones relate to that. We're really trying this like multiple tier approach because it's working great for perimenopause. And we believe we can also scale that into the broader women's health space. So that's like the next 6 to 9 months effort for us. But if you want to know even longer, it's really scaling into other areas of healthcare, not just women's health.
Amazing. Well, we're looking forward to seeing it in action. I mean, thanks so much for sharing your story and your insights. I think what you're doing with Uva is just really it's innovative, but it's also really needed. With women's health. For our listeners, people watching, if you see this clip, if you want to learn more, please check out Oova at Oova. That's OOVA.life. And Amy, thanks so much again.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great speaking with you.